Hey everybody, Adam Savage in my cave alongside Norm Chan and Bauble. Sir, you have brought some beautiful Star Wars goodness to show us today.
Yeah, thank you. So I brought in a 1/72 scale Star Wars StarFortress, and this is actually a resin printed. I made the files. I printed it in resin. This is actually a conventional scratch build of the Hammerhead Corvette. So this is at 1/44 scales. I put X-wings next to them so that we can have a good sense of the scale.
Oh, so, these are the correct scales?
Correct scales.
Those are Bandai models, right?
Bandai models.
Wow.
So Adam, I met Bauble 2 years ago at Wonderfest, the model making convention that we go every year, and Bauble had brought a Foundation jump ship, which was honestly the best thing I saw. And we had a great conversation about it, and you were telling me that you originally did scratch building, but you started moving into resin printing your models. The 2 years since, this is what you've been working on.
Yeah, so it took me about a year and a half to get the files ready, printing it in iteratively to get everything just right. So yeah, it took a long time, but that's what I enjoy about the whole thing. I enjoy the process. I actually
the tedium, the dialing into every detail.
Yes, exactly.
Now, are these both, to your best knowledge, like super accurate replicas of the actual ships, or did you make small changes here and there?
Well, with the conventional build, I do have to make changes. But sometimes that's good because you can't actually get the exact parts, in terms of the greeblies that we want to use. So, for example, in this one, you can see that that piece there actually came from a Bandai Millennium Falcon kit.
Yeah,
and I actually really like it. It's like almost a happy accident because the features, the depth in terms of the features in it, actually add dimensions to the model. So I really appreciated that. So.
This one I know is a purely digital model as it appeared in Last Jedi.
I believe that one is
and this one is as well. But Rogue One was when ILM and John Knowles started to digitize the greeblies from the model kits, from the ILM model kits.
Yeah.
And so you and other model builders in replicating the Corvette have that, can actually still kit bash.
That's right, yeah.
I'm curious about your process of getting the panel lines deep enough. Did you iterate several tests at the beginning to figure out how you wanted to paint it?
Yeah, in fact, pretty much everything in here, there's like 200 plus pieces that I printed and put together. All of them had to be iteratively, designed and put together, and then printed, and then see whether it actually still makes sense or not, before I move on to the next step.
Yeah.
So, for example, this piece. Okay.
Okay.
Oh yeah, actually most of these are actually held together by magnets. Wow. So, yeah. So easier for me to actually take them apart to print, to actually paint.
And things don't break off when they can just pull off.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I'm noticing something here really striking, Bauble. This is 1/72 scale.
Right.
This is 1/44. These are common like Bandai scale.
Yeah.
So technically this is a bigger ship shrunken down.
Right.
But because you're going from scratch build styrene to 3D printed parts, this actually looks to my eye like a bigger ship shrunken even smaller down.
Yeah.
Because the lines are that much tighter and closer together.
Well, these panels are smaller this is smaller than we would work on the paneling.
Yeah, it would really tough to work on it, on the sort of conventional scratch build. So yeah, with this one, I can get the panel lines down to about 200 microns, which is about twice the width of a human hair.
Yeah.
So
there's variability. I see some panel lines are not only like they're not as deep.
Right.
Like so you're adding in the world building, some parts of the ship are bigger panels, some are smaller panels, some are less relief.
That's right. Yeah. Again, using that to actually lend dimensionality to the model.
Are you doing that Bandai technique of ink dropping into the panel, the lines?
Oh,
or are you using paint or oils to get in there?
Mostly just oil. Getting in there. So The other thing about working with resin is the fact that you also got to be very mindful. If you make the panel line too deep, the prints can actually come out messed up. So there's also dialing in the right depth so that you get just what you need without messing up the print process itself.
What would be your recommendation to someone trying to iterate this for the first time? did you find a sweet spot?
Just be patient, just play with it. I would say about 300 microns in would be okay. But if you need greater depth, you need to start iterating.
So would you print out stuff and then actually do painting tests on it to see how you liked the paint?
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah. Right. Also, the other thing is that, especially with curved surfaces, the print lines from resin printing can be a nightmare.
Oh yeah, so, getting rid of those.
So getting rid of those
and
can
you
be
can get rid of those both with sanding, but also by orienting, changing the part's orientation.
That's right. Well, to some extent that works, but again, that's the step size. At least with the conventional 3D printers nowadays, really to get at the best level of quality, it's still best to sand. So yeah, I got examples of that over here. So you can see this piece is curved, and you can see the print lines on it.
Oh yeah, so, yeah.
That's stepping, yeah.
And you have to get rid of all of that.
I have to get rid of all of that. And imagine if I just print this whole thing as a piece, single piece, it'd be a nightmare to sand.
So how are you sanding this, or are you painting it, or doing a little of both?
Are you
I'm sanding.
Sanding.
I am not adding. I'm not adding. I am just gonna sand.
So in your modeling, do you add extra relief to account for how much sanding you'll do? Like you're gonna take off 100 microns?
Not really. So I know I'll be taking off maybe about 30 microns, but that's easily accommodated by the print itself. So,
I miss the days when you could mix lacquer to go on super thin and super opaque.
Right, yeah.
I want to talk to you about, I want to get to the lighting, but the painting is so beautiful. Even little details like these little battery covers are brass. Tell me about your technique here for the rusting and the pitting in the corners.
Yeah, so this is basically hairspray painting, the hairspray chipping technique.
Yeah. Okay.
So what I did was I just did 2 layers. So I did 1 layer of brown first, and I chipped that, and then what I did is I put on a clear coat, locked that in, and then went on with the second layer.
Amazing.
2 layers. So that gets us that
so
effect.
You're doing almost in real time. Okay, as you apply that hairspray masking layer, you're using a brush to pick it apart.
Well, I use a fine toothpick that I sharpen even more so that I can just pick out what I need. So
I also really love the subtle browns you've added in here in the weathering on the engines. There's like you got like 4 or 5 colors going on in there, right?
Yeah, that's right. And again, this is just very patient work. I would use oil. And I would wait a couple of days for the oil to dry, and then I would actually typically hit it with some layers of the original paint, so that fades it in, and I would apply another layer of oil. So I keep doing that 4 or 5 layers to get to this. So typically that takes a couple of weeks on and off to do.
I love, just like in your foundation model, the interior parts of the ship that are visible and the metallics that you put on. That really communicates like something that catches the eye. Just in there.
The stuff inside the caging over here too.
Yeah. In fact, there's actually a big piece of metallic in there. You can't see it, but I know it's there. So. So.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, but again, it's those subtleties. Oh, and if you look through here, you can actually see there's also a metallic layer.
You are just selling it to yourself. I love it.
Pretty much 95% of it.
Is there? So, I mean, my favorite part about paint jobs is there's a point at which the paint job fools me. That I can't remember how I did what I can see.
Yeah.
You get to that.
I get to that.
Yeah.
So
because I feel like I can see you in here being like,
this one also because I have this cutout here to show the bombs. That again, was a very time-consuming process, and once I get that done, I had to put it in there and seal it properly before I do the rest of it, and hope that everything stays fixed in there. So there's a certain amount of risk to that too. So
do you have online? Do you document these builds? Do you post photos of how you did it and what your techniques were?
I do post occasionally on Facebook, but most of the time I'm just having fun. So
fair. And then you go to Wonderfest to show off your
So
I'm curious about. I mean, I've done a huge amount of this kind of work. Although the scale at which this is happening is exhausting. I mean, that is a very, very refined work. But I'm curious if after spending time making this, and spending a couple of years doing this, is there one that you prefer, or do you think you'll go oscillate between these techniques?
I think actually there's strength in both techniques. I got to say that when I first started resin printing and doing this, I almost want to cry because because all this print lines, they don't exist in a conventional scratch build.
Right.
So, and you got to be really patient about sanding things. The other thing that was sort of really annoying about these resin prints is that they're fragile.
Yeah.
So and well, the material's gotten better. So like if I take this piece, drop it on the floor right now, probably won't break. But there used to be a time when they would just shatter.
I remember. Yeah.
But even now, right, this is still quite fragile. As in, if I apply too much force when I'm working on it, it can break. So.
And how do you think about the longevity of this stuff? Because styrene is going to last for a certain amount of time, but this with any UV exposure, it will probably get more brittle.
That's right. That's a very good point. In fact, I've been doing an experiment in my backyard. I would print stuff, leave it out there in the sun.
Good.
For I would just leave it out there. There were pieces out there that were like a year plus, and I can see what kind of resin is starting to bend, starting to fracture, versus those that are not.
Oh, I'm so glad you're doing this kind of experimentation.
Well, I do think we need to actually have a better understanding of the longevity.
Oh, we really do, because all of our stuff is going to melt in 20 years.
Yeah, right.
Talk to me about your lighting. You have a really cool scheme for getting the lights.
Yeah. So what I've done is you can also actually use 3D printing to actually make these kind of LED holders. So the file is very easy to put together. So that's what I did here.
So that's a resin file, and the holes I see that make it look like a salt shaker are actually the ports for fiber optic wires.
Yeah, that's right. So you can actually insert a fiber optics in there. I might have one here. I can't find that anymore. It's fine.
Is that it?
No. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, hey. Oh, I love that technique because you know why? That allows you to pick up things that you drop onto the floor so easily.
That's how I look for everything on the floor.
Okay, yes. All right. So you can see here that if I actually put a fiber in here, I can get the light
right
to pipe.
out at the end.
Yeah, to pipe right through it.
That's great. You can make it a little press fit.
That's right. Oh, actually, you just put some PVA or white glue on it, and that's it. It stays in place. I wouldn't use super glue because it would actually cause the fiber to become brittle.
Yeah.
So yeah. So this is how I actually light up these models this way. So
have you done some beauty photo shoots with these?
Only a few to send to Norm.
Oh wow!
So yeah, not really. So yeah.
I mean, you say you don't document your work, but what you had at Wonderfest, and I know you had a binder of your photos. It's all and we're very lucky for you to share that part of the process.
Right. Yeah. Oh, actually, I'll be glad to pass you those photos that I have for this one. The other thing I guess I want to say about one of the nice advantages of using resin printing is that I can easily print these structures to hold magnets in place.
Right.
Imagine doing that with a conventional scratch print.
Oh, I don't have to. I've had to worry about making models where huge chunks of it flew away for camera, and it's a nightmare.
Yeah. So with this tool right now, I can actually very precisely position the magnets so that they click on
and everything just pops right back in. Yeah. I'm not going to force that. Oh, look at that.
Yep, you got it in.
There go the tolerances.
All right.
It still blows my mind that this X-Wing, which Bandai makes, and we've talked about how great Bandai's injection molded process is.
They really are so
like how many crisp details they can create in the panel lines. Your print of it exceeds the amount of details, even though intellectually I know they are the same scale. This pilot would fit in here.
Yeah.
This still looks like a smaller scale.
It really does.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Again, I think once you dial in for every shape and form, right, how thick the panel lines ought to be, it can click out. It can click together quite well. So, yeah.
Are there still a few things you have to finish on this, or is it completely done?
I think it's completely done.
Okay, good.
So I actually go through a process, right, that maybe in about half a year I'll come back and say, all right, I can fuss with this a little bit more.
Exactly.
But I think most of us do that.
Yeah.
So
how do you choose which models to do from the pantheon of science fiction and Star Wars?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like if you're going to devote a year and a half to a ship, what draws your eye to these and the Foundation jump ship?
The Foundation jump ship was a very easy decision because the design was so new and it conveys such a fantastic visual language. I had to do that one.
Yeah.
So yeah. So with Star Wars, right, it's again that whole ugly, messy, but beautiful aesthetic that really draws me in. So, and again, this is where we can actually add details to the ship to again add scales and dimensions to the model. So I really like that aspect of things as well.
What is the next Star Wars model? What is the next model you're thinking about producing, or are you already working on it?
I'm actually thinking of making the Fallout Pratt Wind ship, the airship.
Okay.
So, yeah, that one looks like there's some very interesting challenges to that. So yeah, and it's again a sort of ugly but beautiful aesthetic to it that I like a lot. So
is there a material or a process that you want to tap into as tools become more accessible? We start using things like the UV printer, right? And now that you can print in different, you can tint your resins. Like, is there some fabrication process you want to use?
I'm pretty old school. In fact, I love the process of just making things as much with my hands as possible.
Yeah.
So
everything that's digital just gets you to that point.
Yeah,
where
and
you're
then
starting
I'm
to
gonna,
this,
exactly. The whole thing about sanding, even though it's a pain, I got to a point where I kind of like it. Because I can see the results that comes out will pop when I get it done right. So
I'm always thinking of it as a conversation between me in the present and me in the future. Like me in the present is like, God, this sucks. But me in the future is going to be so happy when I'm painting this thing.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Right. So yeah.
I am always painting things and making them so that they work for camera.
That's right.
Right. So I don't take time on details that you don't see. But you've made a model that rewards the person in the presence of the model. And I really, really like that. All of the little details you have hidden behind this, it's just a totally different kind of build. And it's so immersive.
It is very enjoyable to me too, because again, I know most people won't see that piece that I have in but I know it's there.
Yeah.
And I want it to be as good as possible.
Right.
So,
you were thinking about, you had this idea of like, okay, do I put some detail in there? And some part of your brain was like, yes, I do. And I find myself sometimes surprised by where the lines in the sand that my brain wants to draw are, right? Like, and I'm like, okay, we're going to do that.
Well, it's why you also have like a finished side with all the paneling.
Right, that's right.
And then a revealed side, almost a cross-section side to see the interior.
Right. Again, the thing is that, this was a bomber. It kind of like mirrors what World War II Flying Fortress is. And I really like the fact that, they have all these bombs that are in this thing here, this structure here. So
it was only in the beginning of the movie, and like the Millennium Falcon, it's one of those ships that you can visualize as you're watching it, the interior, because they have the whole scene where the pilot is climbing down the ladder.
Right.
So you get a sense of the space, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And I really love that.
But by the way, what is in the movie doesn't scale when I put stuff.
That's also why it's like the Falcon.
So that was kind of annoying. So I had to take some artistic license here. Because I still put in the ladder, but it's going to be hard for anybody to try to climb down.
R2-D2's leg rockets do not fit inside his body.
Yeah.
Bauble, it is such really beautiful work. I can't thank you enough for bringing it here. And it's our delight to film it and show people this. This is just gorgeous.
I know you're not bringing this to Wonderfest this year, but thank you for bringing Wonderfest, a little bit of Wonderfest to here, and it gets me really excited for the convention coming up.
Thank you. I appreciate the two of you spending time with me on this.
Thank you guys so much for watching. One of my favorite things we make in our tested store are demerit badges. These are like scout badges, but for screwing stuff up, because screwing up is not just a part of the making process, it is intrinsic to it, and we like to celebrate that. We've got 27 so far in the Supervisors bundle that you can go buy right now by clicking on the link in the description, but we also have a booster pack of some brand new patches. This is the demerit badge for burning off your eyebrow. I am proudly sewing that to all of my clothes. This is the demerit badge for having a messy workbench, which I do not get today. My workbench is super clean. And we have new octagonal patches that are, merit badges. This is the merit badge for sweeping up your shop. Congratulations, I'm so proud of you. And this, oh my God, this is great. This is the merit badge for creating a clean space on your bench. Hey, we got to take our successes where they come and meet them there. Go to the tested-store.com or adamsavage.com to buy any of these, or click on a link in the description.